You're listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Leftist lies and globalists, I'm pushing them back. From the saloon to the airwaves, I'm spitting it raw. Constitution's my compass, liberty's law. Big gulfs creeping, shadows on the land. Feds with the schemes trying to bind up my hands. But I'm the Sherpa, guiding through the storm. Red, white, and blue, yeah, freedom's reborn. They spin their tails, but I see through the haze. Media maggots, lost in the maze. I'm calling it out, no fear in my soul. This patriot's fire ain't losing control. Conservative Sherpa leading the fight. Torch in the dark, burning bright in the night. Stand for the truth, won't bow to the game. Sherpas, come and remember my name. Sherpas rising. Freedom's calling. Leftist judges twisting, trying to steal our rights, but I'm locked and loaded, got them in my sights. From J6 to the border, they're selling us out. I'm screaming from the mountain, hear my rainbow shout. They mock the flag, but I'm holding it high. Stars and stripes forever under God's open sky. No globalist chains gonna cage this land. I'm the Sherpa with the truth in my hand. They push their agenda, but I'm breaking the mold. Their promise is empty, their heart's ice cold. Chicago's bleeding, borders torn apart. I'm fighting for the people with the warrior's heart. Conservative Sherpa leading the fight. Torch in the dark, burning bright in the night. Stand for the truth, won't bow to the game. Sherpas, come and remember my name. Sherpas rising. I've walked the line, 41 years, badge on the grind, now I'm on the air, my voice like a blade, cutting through the lies that the traitors made. Hurricanes rage, but we're standing tall, sheriffs of the Constitution answering the call. From the saloon to the heart of the fray, we're taking back America, no more delay. Conservative Sherpa leading the fight, torch in the dark, burning bright in the night. Stand for the truth, won't bow to the game. Sherpas, come and remember my name. Sherpas rising. Static, hear my voice resound. Conservative Sherpa, freedom's battleground. Berserk, Bobcat, rules will never kneel. For God and country, this fight is real.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, where I am broadcasting from Nofe, Idaho, N-O-F-E, Idaho, in an actual free state instead of California, always spell it with a K. I happen to be your conservative Sherpa. I am this guy, and I am the individual who guides you through the insidious maelstrom of Democrat, leftist, and globalist lies, chaos, deceit, tyranny, and betrayal. And if you would, please, folks, subscribe to the show. We have, let me see if I put this back up. I think we have 663 subscribers to the show. So you can subscribe as well. And if you subscribe to the SHR Media YouTube channel, then don't forget, please click on that little bell, and that means that you get notified of the show when click the bell, and then, hey, look, it's the fat guy. He's going to be on shortly. And why wouldn't you want to listen to him? Folks, you're not going to believe it. What am I doing? Oh, by the way, I should tell you that for the next 2 hours or so, the opinions that you hear are going to be mine and those of my guests. Two guests tonight. Two guests. One you've never seen before. The other one is, well, it's an individual, an act that you've known for all these years. And if you want to also, and you want to opine, let's see if I point in the right direction. Here we go. This is the chat room. So your chats will be put up there. And I want to let you know also that the chat room has been renovated for fall. It looks like this. You can jump into our plush, sumptuous, palatial, and resplendent chat room. You need to be there as much as humanly possible. I am doing the job that the American media maggots won't. I'm fundamentally changing America one leftist doper baby diaper at a time. And we don't water our drinks, just like we don't water our conversation. We are still serving stiff drinks in the saloon, along with, let's see, facts, history, logic, rationality, proportion, context, clarity, and common sense for normal people. And that's what you are. And that's why you listen to me. So politics, religion, crime, culture, race, sex, science, economics, law, we talk about it all right here, where the speech is free, but sadly, the booze, she is not. And I'm streaming on a whole host of places. Here's where you can find me streaming: Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, KLRN. We're simulcasted right now on KLRN and Twitch and X and Rumble and YouTube and all the standard Mark I Model 1 places. So, folks, ladies and gentlemen, again. Oh, by the way, new mug. Let's see. Can you read that? I hope you can. Kettle One Vodka. New. Hey, this is a copper mug, and it just happens to keep my potato water really cold. Nazdrovya. So thanks for being here to everybody. So, folks, I'd like to welcome a brand new individual to the show who you, I believe, will find to be altogether too engaging, too logical, too factual, too whip smart, too realistic, too sensical. He's written a bunch of books, and I showed it to you already. We're going to be talking about this one tonight. Here's my copy that has, look at all the things that I hope we get to, but I'm not exactly sure that we will, but I'll try. I will try. Anyway, it's called How to Stop Racism in America, a Real Solution for African-American Plight. And he's also a co-founding member of EBLM. And I know what you're thinking. Did he fire 6 shots or only 5? Well, being this is a 44 logical show, I'm bringing NEIL MAMMEN to you. Who is this? Oh, you're going to find out who NEIL MAMMEN is. So if we could, let's get NEIL MAMMEN into the saloon right now. And I would definitely like to welcome him here. NEIL MAMMEN, it's great to see you.
Hey, BZ, great to be on the show. Thank you very much for having me.
But wait, there's more. There's also Lonnie Poindexter. Now, this is the act down here that you've known for all these years. And the dealio of this is, first, I want to thank Neil for agreeing to be in the show right here. And as I said to Neil before, I fervently believe this to be true. You need to get a copy of this book. And Neil is going to explain what EBLM is. And I think you'll be shocked, dismayed, kerfuffled, gobsmacked when you discover what is this book about? Well, we're going to go into that. What is EBLM? It sounds like those people with Patricia colors that go out and buy mansions. Are they linked to these people? And the answer is no. And so everybody is inexorably linked here. NEIL MAMMEN is a co-creator of EBLM, which is Every Black Life Matters. And Lonnie Poindexter is also, I believe, a board member of that. And Lonnie, again, thank you very much, who suggested, I know this cool cat named NEIL MAMMEN, and he has me on the board of EBLM. You ought to come on and just invite him in. And like the pastor that we spoke about before the show, who I didn't get to sufficiently early, I wanted to make sure, okay, well, if Lonnie recommends NEIL MAMMEN, I better get him on the show, because the pastor that Lonnie recommended, he happened to pass away. And, today is today, tomorrow is tomorrow. It's a brand new day. Who knows what the heck is going to happen? No one really knows. But Lonnie said, this guy is going to be a superior interview, and you want to speak to him. And here's the other thing that's really weird. And I didn't realize this until I called NEIL, or NEIL called me. First I texted him, and then finally I realized, why do I have NEIL MAMMEN in my phone already? Because I thought, I haven't talked to him before, and this is going to be so weird. And I spoke to NEIL before the show already about this. Is that he was looking to move, and I recommended to NEIL, because I used a particular group of people to help me move out of California, always spelled with a K, to Nof, Idaho. And I recommended those guys to move me from California to Idaho. And then I recommended them to NEIL. And NEIL, you're not going to believe that. That was back. I have you in the phone, and I've had you here since 2022.
Right.
So when you called, it's like this lit up. It says NEIL MAMMEN. Why does it say NEIL MAMMEN? How have I known you before? This is so passing strange. And then I finally realized, okay, that's it. That's why. Again, I'm just blurting all this stuff up front, because trust me, NEIL, I will give you time to speak. By gosh. But this is one of those shows where, in terms of trying to craft it, I almost didn't know where to start. There were so many things to cover, and clearly, because everybody knows me. Let me put this up. Everyone knows that I have all these tabs up here, and I never get to half the tabs that I want to. Plus, I also have a bunch of interview questions over here. I have your book. Rommel, you magnificent bastard, I read your book. And so I've got tons of questions for NEIL. It's not like I will be lacking in some facile fashion to be able to speak with you. So before we get into the meat of the matter, particularly this book, I'd like to have, and the show is going to deal with two things that you never want to get involved with, not on the same show: race and religion. Dun, dun, dun. Wait a minute. If I had a producer, you would have heard this. But I don't have a producer, and so that's not what you heard. Anyway, NEIL MAMMEN, could you give us a little bit of a background about yourself, like where you grew up, your education, your interests, and the like, so that we can kind of understand a little bit about where you're coming from, sir?
Okay. Well, I was born at a very young age in Ghana, Africa. So, and then from there, we moved to Jamaica, to Sudan. From Sudan, we went to Yemen. And in between, I was in a boarding school in Ethiopia, which is right now Eritrea. It used to be Ethiopia at the time. And then they had the coup, and it became Eritrea. So, and then my parents are actually from India originally. My dad, we've been Christians. We come from a Christian family. Been Christians since about 51 AD, so about almost 2,000 years.
Way back.
Way back when St. Thomas came to India, and he founded the Indian church there, which we call the Marthoma Church. Marthoma meaning St. Thomas. And however, but during my father's generation, which was in the 50s and the 60s, 50s and 60s, most of my uncles and my father ended up being communists. So I grew up in a Marxist home.
Okay, great.
And then my dad became a Christian when I was 5. So I did my own immediate home was Christian, but we have some very famous Marxists in the family. One was actually one of the speakers for the World Council of Churches. which is one of the churches that pushes liberation theology, which is basically Marxism packaged with Christian verbiage. So I've been, I spent a lot of time there. Finally came to the U.S. So lived in Yemen on the Sharia law. Kind of escaped from there, and it's in the book. The story's in the book. Jesus is involved in politics, and then finally came to the States. Got a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, computer engineering, master's degree in solid state physics and electrical engineering at the age of 22, and started working in the industry. Founded about 4 companies. Didn't make myself filthy rich, but I had a lot of fun doing it, and here I am. And then in I should say in 2021, 2022, I kind of got a presence on the internet and found that I was blacklisted in Silicon Valley, and decided that if I couldn't get a job in Silicon Valley, basically nobody would hire me, because they would just Google me and I'd be on Fox News or something, as not a very woke kind of person. So I decided, well, if I was not going to work, I might as well not work in Idaho.
Okay, folks, that's the first of the night. Okay, right there.
And enjoy a nice piece of property. So we bought some acres, some cows, and just having fun.
Okay, so there was a dude like you that I knew one time when I was in homicide, and the guy was a reserve deputy sheriff, and the guy was also a pathologist. He was a full-fledged doctor, and he would come out to some of my homicides, and then he passed the bar and became a lawyer. And I thought that he should be a nuclear engineer or something like that. And he was, I called him, and you are just like him in terms of, I called this guy, he's the quintessential underachiever. Neil Mammen, you are the quintessential underachiever. Holy, I wish you would garner some credibility sometime, if you would, pretty please. My God. Okay,
I am working on a new startup that I will mention.
Okay, that beggars the point. Then what got you started in I think you said electrical engineering?
Yeah, electrical and computer engineering. Yeah.
Okay, so what got you interested into that?
Well, my dad was a professor in physics, which is why we were traveling around the world.
Okay.
So I grew up with 2 things one was science was easy. Engineering is easy. Mathematics is easy. It all depends on how good your teacher is. If you've got a stupid teacher, it's going to be confusing. If you've got a good teacher, you're going to go, that makes sense. Now, it doesn't mean that you'll love it, at least, but it will make sense. So so I came to the States, and I thought I had 2 options. I could do nuclear engineering or electrical engineering, and I thought electrical engineering sounded a lot more fun. So that's how I ended up in that.
Yeah, both things that only an underachiever would seek out, like yourself. Me, I was just a dumb flatfoot for 41 years. Okay, moving right along. Anyway,
well, see, I'm afraid to do that kind of work. I can't think fast enough for that kind of work.
Math. Yeah, that doesn't compute. When you talk about math, it let's see, God, I can't even find it. Yeah, this is what I think of with regard to math. So anyway, thanks for being here. I was reading your CV, and let me see if I can go to the proper page for that. Okay, this is Neil Mammen's CV. This is from the Children's Educational Opportunity Act. And then I'm going to go through various places where Neil can be found and where Neil can be read. And the very first one is every EBLM, everyblm.com. And it's right here, everyblm.com. So stop, if we could, right here. And Neil Mammen, you're the co-creator. Lonnie, you're on the board also. And this is weird.
I'm just an employee.
An employee. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, employee, let me see if I can get this focused. Okay. First, let me take this off so that you can see the whole thing. All right. Folks, if you would, look closely at Neil Mammen's book. And there are a bunch of famous people right there. And let's go closer, if you would, folks. Go closer. Oh, darn, my finger's in the wrong space. Who's that face right there on the book. Why? That would be Lonnie Poindexter, wouldn't it? It sure as heck would. So anyway, great book. In terms of reading your CV, I discovered, Neil Mammen, that in your numerous descriptors, it says that your true passion is being an apologist and a defender of the faith. So I had to stop right there and I had to say, BZ, because that's what I call myself. Ask Neil Mammen, what is an apologist? I've heard this term before. So what is that?
So the word apologist comes from the Greek word apologia, and it comes from 1 Peter 3:15, which says, always be ready to give an apologia for the faith that you have, but do it with gentleness and respect. And that word apologia really means a defense or an explanation or an argument. So it's an argument, a defense, an explanation of what you believe. So always be really ready to give a defense, an argument, explanation of what you believe, but do it with gentleness and respect. And so apologetics is the defense of Christianity in a scientific way, reason, logic, philosophy, archaeology, history, in other words, proving that it's true. And that will take you to my website, my ministry website, which is No Blind Faiths, because part of my ministry is to show that blind faith is bad and all faith should be based on logic and reason and facts and history and archaeology. And it should be based on truth and science, of course.
So let me go to this right now, if I could. This is your website, and I would like you to explain, if you could, because a lot of people are going to get confused. I said this at the beginning of the show, and I think I said it also in the promos. And it leads to a whole host of questions. You're the co-creator along with Kevin McGarry, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I had him on the show about 2.5 years ago. Oh, BZ, get the book out. Yes, okay. I had him, and he spoke about this book, Woked Up, which is why I wanted to make sure that I had Neil on here as well. So I have now had both co-creators of EBLM. EBLM. So explain, if you would, EBLM. Why EBLM? What does it mean? Why is it so potentially confusing? And yet at the same time, you say, and I believe you, it's not, if you just listen to what it's about. So Neil Mammen, can you explain that, please?
Yeah. So basically, it was 2020, and we were sitting at home watching the news reports of all the violence with BLM going in and tearing down cities, destroying Black communities, and Antifa and all that. And my wife said to me, do you know that our some really good friends of ours who were Christians went to the BLM protest? And I'm like, really? She said, yeah, I don't think they realize that they're Marxists. They don't realize, they just want to show that they're not racist, that they care for Black people. So then she turned to me and she said, you should call Kevin and have him call Dean Nelson and get the Frederick Douglass Foundation to create an organization that people who want to show they're not racist can align themselves with. And I said, that's a great idea. So I called Kevin up, and Kevin said, oh, that's a great idea. So he called Dean Nelson up, who was the head of Frederick Douglass Foundation. Kevin was the California president at the time. And Dean said, Kevin, we're so busy at the Frederick Douglass Foundation getting out the vote for Trump. It was 2020. So we've got all these people working on it. We have no time to focus on this. Why don't you and Neil do it? Because Dean was a good friend. So, it's like you go to your pastor, you say, Pastor, we're just growing our church. We need a parking lot ministry. And the pastor says, great, you're hired. Well, that's what happened, right?
You talked yourself into a job.
Yeah. So Dean said, you guys go do it. So Kevin called me up and said, great. I guess we're doing it. And I said, Kevin, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm not Black. And he goes, no, but you are African-American.
Yeah.
Because I was born in Africa.
Okay. Yes.
So he said, in fact, he said, you're the only African-American that's going to be in this company at this point. And that's been true because he said, all the rest of us are just Americans. And now we have an African too from Kenya in the group. but everything else was we're all Americans. I said, okay, I guess that's me. And so that's how it started. Now, how did we come up with the name? The reason we came up with the name is because we wanted people to associate it, because if we came up with a name that was completely independent, people would not find the connection. So we said, okay, Black lives do matter, but the problem is BLM thinks only Black lives matter and only certain Black lives matter. They don't care about the conservative Black lives. They don't care about the Black lives in the room, right? They don't care about Black lives of the Republican congressman, right? They only care about some Black lives. So we said, well, what we're trying to say is that all Black lives matter, but since all Black lives matter was taken, so we went to every Black life matters, and it kind of fell in place. And so we have a bunch of principles. Our principles are real justice from womb to tomb. So we're pro-life 100%. We believe in the traditional family, which we'll talk about in the book, active fatherhood, free markets, educational choice, nonviolence, and criminal justice reform. Because we do believe there is some criminal justice reform that needs to be done. It just has to be done in a proper manner, because there are good cops and there are bad cops. And when you lump them all together, the good cops get the brunt of that hate when they shouldn't. And so you've got to distinguish between the good and the bad, just like there are good politicians and bad politicians. Like there are good Black people and bad Black people, good white people and bad white people. So you've got to be able to distinguish that. And we thought we've got to be able to go through that. And so that's how it all started.
Okay, so there is this website, Every BLM. Let me go to some of the others that Neil has. If you want to discuss this is Neil Mammen at neilmammen.substack.com. And my guess is
it's actually just mammen.substack.com.
Oh, okay. So this is your repository of a whole lot of articles, I would guess.
Yeah, a bunch of articles I've written, like the one below that you can see is the world running out of food. Everybody talks about is the world running out of food, and actually turns out it's not. It's actually quite the opposite. And then there's some talks about the market, the one you have there, the marketing of Palm Sunday. How does God fulfill prophecy with free agents, right? If he forces you to fulfill prophecy, then you're not free. So how does he do that? And I talk about how that happens, the mechanics of that, the logic of that.
Then there's also this website. Now, this is where you write articles under Every BLM as well, too.
Yeah.
So here are a number of articles that folks you can go to. And I want to emphasize the website. It's, I don't know if you can really see it up here. It's everyblm.com, everyblm.com. Then in addition, there's this website, which is noblindfaith.com, noblindfaith.com. Neil Mammen, what are people going to find here when they go?
So this is the apologetics one. So if you are not a Christian, or you're a Christian who has blind faith in Christianity, you're a Christian who says the Bible said it, I believe it, that settles it. Well, that's a bad place to start, because somebody could say, well, the Quran said it, I believe it, that settles it. So the question is, why would you want to believe the Bible, not the Quran or not the Bhagavad Gita? What tells you that that's right? Is it just a feeling? Well, Muslims have a stronger feeling in their heart than you do about your religion. So that's not a good basis. So why is the Bible true? If the Bible is true, and I absolutely believe it's true, but I can prove that it's true on so many areas. So how do you prove the Bible is true? So on this website, we go through all those questions. In fact, there's about 5 questions I deal with. One is, I prove that blind faith is very dangerous. And I kind of give you an example. If people have blind faith, then they can do terrible things. You've got to have a rational faith, not a superstitious faith. So I talk about why that's. And the second thing I prove is I prove that God exists. And I prove that God exists using science and not using the Bible. In fact, I don't use the Bible at all in that proof. And I have a book there too. I don't know if you saw that, BZ. It's called Who is Agent X? Proving that science and logic show it's more rational to think God exists. And I go through just the science of it. I don't think, that's right there somewhere. Yeah, with the little black one there. Yeah. Or the one all the way on the right too. So basically that one's a slide book and the other way. Yeah. So I basically use science to prove that God exists. Well, once we prove that God exists, then we say, okay, let's look at if God exists, there's only 3 religions that are possible, or actually 3 religions and 1 option. They're only either Christianity is true, or Judaism is true, or Islam is true, or it's an unknown God. Because all the other religions eliminate themselves. Hinduism has multiple gods. You can't have multiple gods. You can't have you can't have more than one all-powerful being. So any polytheistic religion just drops out immediately, right? So you're left with the three major religions and the one unknown. Well, the one unknown, if we can prove that Christianity is true, the one unknown falls away. So we start focusing on Christianity, and really it's Judeo-Christianity. So those are the two we look at, and we start with the Bible. And if I can prove the Bible is accurate, then I have started my step forward. So the next thing we do is we prove that the Bible is accurate and was what they wrote 2,000 years ago. So then we say, okay, so what they wrote 2,000 years ago is what I have. But what if they were fooled? What if they claim Jesus rose from the dead? What if Jesus didn't really rise from the dead? So then the next thing we do is we prove that Jesus actually physically existed, is a person in history, and he physically rose from the dead. And my claim is it's a case that will stand up in a court of law. And so go back to the summary. Blind faith is bad. God exists. The Bible is true. Jesus Christ really rose from the dead. And that gets you to the fundamentals of Christianity. And then we go into, well, what is Christianity really? So then I talk about why Christ had to die and why God must punish sin. And if you think about it philosophically, you don't need the Bible to come to that conclusion. In fact, I'm writing a book right now that talks about how you can arrive at Jesus, or you don't know his name, but you will arrive at a savior even if you don't have the Bible logically, just using philosophy. And so we explain all that, and that encompasses some of the, and then we go through other things like, can God exist? Can God create a stone so big that he can't move it? Can miracles really happen? I talk about, is it impossible for miracles to happen? And I talk about the scientific premise behind that. And it turns out that it's actually quite possible for we can explain almost every miracle in the Bible in some scientific matter that does not violate the laws of physics. There's one or two that may, but most of them don't.
Folks, I can tell what kind of a show this is going to be already. And we're not going to do any breaks, okay? Because there otherwise won't be enough time for this. So I just want to remind everybody.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And my guest tonight is NEIL MAMMEN, and also Lonnie Poindexter is here, who recommended NEIL to me. Lonnie, at any point, of course, obviously, if you would, please chime in. Also, Jesus is involved in politics.com. And that kind of pushes me over to this and where I want to go. I didn't know that this was written in 2012. I got this book first because I thought, oh, this is really interesting. I'll buy this first. I want to have you back, and I want to talk about this. Jesus is involved in politics. That has an entirely, I could do 2 hours over that thing, and I bet you could too. Also, we hit the Children's Educational Opportunity Act, and let me see that. Yeah, those are the things that I want to talk about.
Well, the Children's Educational Opportunity Act is an act that's they're signing the petitions right now to put it in California, and basically it'll give every child in California $17,000 if they quit the public school and do their own thing.
Yes.
Now, you don't know. There are some dangers whenever you take money from the government can dictate what they want you to do and take control. But the CEO Act is different because it is a petition, it is a proposition, and so the only way you can change it is by going back to the people. Legislators can't touch this. So it's fixed. It does not allow the government to interfere in anything. They can't stop you from doing anything as long as the accreditation is standard along with what they have today. So I think it's a good thing.
So NEIL MAMMEN, you're a twofer in California. You're not just hated in Silicon Valley. Oh no, you're hated by California itself. Always spell it with a K.
Now, to be fair, this is not my proposition. I've been working with Kevin McNamee on this. So
it's like, oh my gosh, dude, you have your work cut out for you. Let me transition now through the book, and this is primarily why I wanted to talk to Neil tonight. Well, this is a 2024 book. You can get it at Amazon. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it at probably a whole host of bookstores. I happen to get this from Amazon because I wanted it quickly, and I wanted it now because I wanted to do all these things to it. So for the time being, I want to refer to the things that are in your book here. And the book is called How to Stop Racism in America, a real solution for African America plight. So let's start, if we could. Let me go back to the very first tab that I have here, because as I said before, this is a book, and I already told Neil about this. I know 535 people that should get a copy of this, and that includes every person in the House and every person in the Senate. Because as I told Neil before the show and before we got together with Lonnie, at the conclusion of reading this, and it's not that long, folks. It's not like you have to go through War and Peace, and it's not Tolstoy, and it's completely understandable. And anybody who's highly educated can understand this because it's footnoted greatly. But in 191 pages, NEIL MAMMEN manages to say things that other people have taken 400 to 500 pages in a certain amount of tomes in order to try to explain in a logical fashion. And I'm sure perhaps some of you are probably thinking that, this is just going to be another blah, 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 racist. No, folks, no. Get that out of your brain housing group right now. It all comes together. It all makes sense. And a lot of you, because you are my fans and you're my audience, will start listening to this and you'll go, oh, yeah, that's what I've been thinking all along, all this time.
Yeah.
Except that Neil has managed to place all of these things, questions and answers, in one critical, I believe, compendium right here. And so let's go to BLM for a second. And this was derezzed out of the BLM website. Headline from the LA Times after a BLM protest. According to their website, most of this has been derezzed out. BLM's primary reasons for being included disrupting the nuclear family. That was pulled. Women's reproductive rights. Dismantling patriarchal practices, doing the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege. Okay, more mealy mouth stuff. Fostering a queer affirming network. Sure. Freeing ourselves from the tight grip of heteronormative thinking. Well, one of the things that, and Neil, perhaps you can explain it, communists, socialists, etc., are not big, Marxists, are not big on family. And one of the other things that I believe was also yanked out of the website from BLM was the fact that there was a reference to Marxism in here, and they are inexorably linked. So if you would, NEIL MAMMEN, go into a little bit about BLM and what they've indicated here, and then I want to go just kind of through your book because, oh my God, folks. You need to read this book. Neil, can you take BLM and
yeah, so they were started, as most people know, after the Trayvon Martin incident in Florida. I can't even remember the year, but and then they kind of was on a slow burn for a while. But when George Floyd was killed, they took off. And their whole thing was Black Lives Matter, as you know, and their whole idea was that Black men were being killed in huge numbers in disproportional to white men, are disproportional to Asian men. And they're right, they are being killed disproportional to white men and Asian men, but not disproportional to the crimes that are being committed. Right. So in fact, while I was writing this book, I studied it, and I want to say how many Black people are killed though. Now it turns out that they're not killed disproportionately, they're arrested disproportionately, right? Their number of Blacks put in prison are disproportional to their population, but they're not killed disproportional to the crimes or to the population. It turns out that there is one ethnicity that is killed disproportional to their crime and disproportional to their ethnicity, and that is Asians. Why? Because Asians do so few crimes, and they killed a few of them, and suddenly the percentage of Asians that were killed is far larger than any other. You're like, for a few crimes, these Asians were killed. So it's, when you start looking at the statistics, you go, wait, there's something wrong here. And so the idea of BLM was, we need to right this wrong, but it wasn't a real wrong. But that was what they stated. But then suddenly they're talking about heteronormativity, queer, cisgender, being bad, and I'm like, I'm not a cisgender, I'm nothing, I'm a human, right? And then they want to disrupt the nuclear family. And you look at all this and you say, well, there's something familiar about all this. And when you look at it and you understand that this was the Marxist plan for America that they laid down in the 50s. Like we had a couple of senators who actually read the Marxist plan in the 50s, and these were all part of it. Increasing pornography, breaking down the family, promoting homosexuality, all this stuff was there. And here's why. If you go back, and I don't want to go too back in history, but if you go back in history, and I believe I covered in the book, if you go back in history, when socialism came to America and they wanted to promote it here, they realized it was not going to work. And the reason it was not going to work is because Americans were too independent. They didn't want to be tied into the government. They didn't want the government's help. They were like, get away from me, right? In fact, the whole independence movement in America was, we don't want your stupid British government. We want freedom. We want liberty. So that continued. And so when the socialists, mainly from the Frankfurt School, these were the guys that they were socialists. Hitler was a socialist, but he was a mean socialist. And so they ran away because Hitler didn't want to share his socialism with anybody else. So these guys end up here, and they end up setting up shop at Columbia University. Well, this is in the 30s, right? And they decide they want to bring socialism to America. They try a few experiments with voluntary socialism, and it doesn't work. And they realize why. So they said, here's the point. We've got to do two things. Socialism only works if you don't have a strong family. Socialism only works if you don't have a strong church. Socialism only works if you are dependent on the state, right? So you go through this whole list of things, and that's the only way they'll get socialism. So they have to, well, how do they start? If most of us have the sense of independence, how do we prevent that? Well, you get involved in the schools. So John Dewey, Manning, these all guys get involved in the schools, and they start changing the curriculum for the schools. So you start seeing this whole plan come together, and BLM is just one tiny branch of that, because the last thing that you want to do with socialism is you need the races to not get along with each other. You've got to create riots in the streets. You've got to create instability. That's how Hitler took over Germany. Remember, if you know anything about Hitler, he had these brown shirts going, and they were disrupting the streets. They were causing problems. And Hitler goes, I can solve this. I can solve this. And he did. Overnight, he solved the brown shirt problem. Why? Because they were all working for him. But what they don't tell you is that in the night of the long knives, Hitler goes through and he kills all the brown shirt leadership, because he knows that they put him in power, and they're the only ones who can now take him out of power. Mm-hmm. So if you start looking at all this, you realize a lot of these things are tied together. And the breakdown of the family, this is all tied together, and it's all tied back to socialism and Marxism, which, as I said, I grew up in. My family is all part of that. I mean, it was such, and my family, we would go back to India on vacation, and the argument at the dinner table was not whether socialism was good, but which flavor of Marxism was the best.
Oh, of course. And we need to do this continuously, because, as I've said for quite some time, every new dictator thinks that I can do communism or socialism better than the last guy.
Yeah.
Zoran Mamdani. Yeah. So,
it didn't work because they did it wrong, right?
Yeah, exactly. So then you talk about here in this book, you're talking about the tenets of BLM. And then the very next page, you say, sadly, this isn't going to solve anything. And you write, as a quick example, contrary to solving any problems, CRT dogma is poised to increase racial tensions to the point of breaking. Can you explain that, please, sir?
Yeah. So basically, if you look at CRT and DEI, why CRT and DEI? Because if you understand that it doesn't really work. You promote people to the point of obsolescence, and then people start dying, doctors start killing patients, airline pilots start crashing planes, but CRT is meant to create let's put it this way. One of the things that I noticed is that, because I was looking at it and they're saying, oh, look, there's a Klan rally in North Carolina. I'm like, the Klan, when I last studied the Klan, I can't even remember when it was, the FBI said there were less than 150 Klans people in all of America, right? And then suddenly they have a whole march. Where do these people come from? Well, the only way you can get the Klans people to march is if you can get a counter force, which is, oh, we hate all the white people, we're going to hurt all the white people. Well, naturally, you're going to get the Klan extremists rise up because now they can recruit people. But for years, they couldn't recruit anybody. Suddenly, BLM shows up and Antifa shows up, and the Klan has thousands of people marching with them. Now, it wasn't the Klan, it was whatever they called themselves. But the reality was the white supremacy movement was almost dead because there was nothing to fight against until BLM and Antifa showed up. And that's, again, I'm just using FBI statistics. You can see the number of Klan members or supremacist members rose. Now, you have to be very careful of those numbers, because some of those numbers are, if you're a Christian, you're a white supremacist automatically, right? You're like, wait, what? So, so you have to look at the actual numbers, and once you discern them, you realize they did grow, but again, they're still, the Klan is toothless. There's nothing they can do.
Well, then I looked on page 14 of your book, and this is a quote from Jesse Jackson. And it illustrates it. You already know this. You know where it's going. Jesse Jackson said, "There's nothing more painful to me at this stage in my life than to walk down the street and hear footsteps and start thinking about robbery, then look around and see somebody white and feel relieved. After we've all been through this, just to think we can't walk down our own streets, how humiliating." And then the very next page, page 15, you write, "So the two questions at hand are, what's the real reason for African American plight? How do we change it? The second one is, does racism against African Americans actually exist in the present day? Is it the cause of African American plight? And if so, how do we stop it?" So the first question, NEIL MAMMEN, what's the real reason for African American plight? How do we change it?
Well, that's the whole book, right? So I can.
Sure it is. You bet.
So I can give you the conclusion now if you want, or we can go through a bit. I'm happy to give you the conclusion. I didn't know how you wanted to.
Sure, go ahead and do that. And then I've got, as you might imagine,
you got
a lot of other things that I do want to highlight and go over you with.
Yeah, so the answer is it is not. Quite simply because there's nothing that an African American can't do today that a white person can do. There's not a single thing. But there is what we see is what, and I in that page before that, I document what we call African American plight. So the reality of African American plight is Africans make the least amount of money. They have the highest gang membership. They are highest on welfare. They have the least, the literacy rate is about 17%. And I want to juxtaposition this about, in the height of racism, and this is why I say it's not about racism. At the height of racism in the 1930s with the Jim Crow laws and everything, the literacy rate of Black Americans, African Americans, was 70%, 70. Today, when you can barely find a racist for the life of you, the literacy rate is 17%. So you're telling me that in the last, 30, almost 100 years, it'll be 95 years, the last 95 years, with all our fights against racism, we've not eliminated, in fact, we've made it worse than Jim Crow laws. Obviously, this has nothing to do with racism. There's another good reason why African Americans are in this plight, and that's what we start to go through the history of.
One of the biggest things that, let me see if I've got the right slide for this. There's a gentleman, I'll stop this right now. There's a gentleman that I was listening to, and I made a reference to Hugh Hewitt earlier. I used to listen to Hugh Hewitt's show from Southern California before he moved to DC. And Hewitt is sort of a moderate conservative, and then he left. He went to DC, and then apparently the radio network was looking for somebody else, and they replaced him with Larry Elder. And I happen to think Larry Elder is a hell of a lot smarter and certainly quicker on his feet than Hugh Hewitt. The guy is absolutely brilliant. He reminds me of sort of a younger Thomas Sowell, if you will, who I wear this hat because I think Thomas Sowell is an American treasure. I have a copy of Basic Economics. Everybody should have a copy of his Basic Economics. But one of the things that Larry Elder said during his show, and I bring it up here, is, if you want to escape poverty, you do these very simple things.
Yeah.
And when you think about it and it's applied to your life, this isn't just for blacks or whites or whomever, it's everybody. He says the formula to escape poverty is simple. 1, finish high school. 2, get a job. Don't quit unless you have another one. 3, don't have a child before marriage. 4, avoid the criminal justice system. And if you do those things, you will not be poor. I'm sorry, the amount of common sense in that is staggering and brain glazing. You would think that people would inherently intuit these things, but the answer is quite no, leading me to this in your book. Page 21, you talk about the things that Lonnie and I have spoken about any number of times. And that's this: fathers.
Yep.
You write, in the annals of history, and you just mentioned this, the 20s and 30s stand as a testament to the unyielding spirit of African-American families. They rose like a phoenix from the ashes, surmounting insurmountable odds and carving into a path towards a brighter future. Their unbreakable bonds, coupled with the profound involvement of fathers within their families, became the bedrock of their resilience.
Yes.
It's like, stop making sense. Stop it with that. And this is a book of common sense. Can you address, NEIL MAMMEN, the role of fathers in the once nuclear black family? And then to me, that kicks my butt over to 1964 and a guy that was a major. Well, Neil, perhaps you can take that from here.
Yes, I will. So, back if you look at the reason why the 1930s, and even if you look at the whole the torching of in Oklahoma of the Black Wall Street, all that, the reason why they were doing so well at the time was because black men were doing really well. In fact, and there's a whole bunch of information around that, and I don't want to, but the reason they were doing well is because men were responsible for their family. You need women to tame men. If you don't have a woman and a family to tame a man, you get rogue males. And we see this in nature too. The reason we have rogue elephants is because the elephants that have the females kick out the competitors to them. Same with lions and all that. And you get these rogue males roaming the countryside. So what has happened is, by keeping the fathers there, the fathers now are responsible for a family. They're responsible to work. They can't go out and do whatever they want. Women tame men. And this is the fundamental reason why society has been so focused on family. And as long as the family structure is good, they're okay. And this is why the communists want to break down the family structure in America. Notice, they don't want to break down the family structure in their countries, but they want to break down the family structure here. And so what fathers do is they tame men. And in fact, we can even talk about what we noticed about is, even in the Watts riots back in the 60s,
1965,
the people who they arrested were all teen boys.
Yes.
They were not these 29, 30-year-old. Why? Because something happened in 64 that took the fathers out of the home. And for about a year and a half, there was a group of boys, teen boys, who had no fathers in the home. And that's what caused the Watts riots. And so we see that every time we've destabilized the family and you've got these rogue males out there. In fact, in Islam, to be fair with Islam, one of the problems with Islam, anytime you have multiple wives, because the ratio of women to men, the number of women and the number of male babies and the number of female babies are born, there's a very tight ratio of that. And that ratio is within 1 to 2%. So if, let's say that you have a culture with polygamy, and every man marries 3 women, all of a sudden you have a 15% shortage of wives for 30% shortage of wives for all the rest of the males. So what are you going to do with all these other males? So Islam found the best way to get rid of these extra males, because they were causing problems, is to send them off on Sharia, on jihad. Go fight another nation, go die for us. We'll send you out to fight because we don't have a place for you. So anytime you have this polygamous culture, you will see that the excess of males create this instability. And what do you do about that? Or you get cultures which would then have to go kidnap women from other communities and force them to marry them. And this is the same thing that we're seeing in China today. In China, they had the one-child policy for so long. Right. And as a result of that, people were aborting female babies, right? And so they've got way too many Chinese men right now, and they've got an instability of their culture, and this is something that they're dealing with. Now, turns out they're so draconian they can control them, but at some point you will see the Chinese military is going to have to do something about it, and we've got to keep an eye on that too.
Well, you mentioned 1964. I know what happened in 1964. And there's a very infamous quote that I may or may not go over here, that it's a highly contested quote from Lyndon Baines Johnson. Yeah. And LBJ, because I was alive during that time, LBJ said, "We're going to have a great society. But NEIL MAMMEN, we're going to make this great society by doing what?"
So LBJ was a socialist. You have to understand that right from the start. By the way, before we get there, I do, in the book, I do compare some of the ethnicities, because we brought the Africans here as slaves. And so we're saying this was terrible. And a lot of people think that that's why, because they were slaves, this is what has happened. But I don't know anyone who was a slave today. I know a lot of Black people. And I don't know anyone who's, in fact, I don't know anyone whose father was a slave either. So at the most, maybe their grandfather was a slave. So I don't, unless there's something genetically passed through you, and we know that's not true, that's nonsense. You can't genetically get oppression. You can be oppressed now, or you can have trauma now, but you're not going to get it that genetically passed through to you. So there's nobody who's experienced that. So what is the difference between them and other ethnicities that also experience oppression? The Chinese were brought here as indentured servants, forced to work on the railroads. There was a whole bunch of discrimination against them. They were pushed out. They were forced into their own communities. And yet the Chinese are doing so well today. The Japanese came over here. And when they came over here, they were put in internment camps, and they were discriminated against. All their possessions were taken away. And yet they are making a lot of money in America. And then I look at the Irish. The Irish came over here with the potato famine. They were treated like dirt, and yet the Irish are doing pretty decent. So why are these other ethnicities? I mean, slavery is not the only thing. It's oppression. They were forced out of communities. They were beaten. There's a whole lot of bad things went on. But none of that has happened to this generation of Irish, this generation of Chinese, this generation of Japanese. But something has happened to this generation of African Americans. And what is that? And that's what Lyndon Johnson did. So Johnson was in a bind. He was brought on to the Kennedy ticket only because he would bring Texas with him, right? And Kennedy won by barely 1%. Kennedy almost didn't win. In fact, there's a lot of arguments that Kennedy actually lost, but there was some shenanigans going on, and Kennedy kind of was given the race. So, and he was running against Richard Nixon. So Johnson has this problem. He was just made vice president. He just became president when Kennedy died. So he'd never run through a re-election on his own. He knew he was going to lose the South completely, because the South, even though they had become, many have become Democrats because they were already voting for FDR, the South knew that LBJ was the biggest racist around because he had said so many things.
Bingo.
As a senator in Texas, he had said horrible things as a senator. He had voted against the Civil Rights Act. He had objected to the not Civil Rights Act. So he had voted against the Anti-Lynching Act. He actually voted for the Civil Rights Act. He's the one who signed it in place. But he voted against the Anti-Lynching Act, and he said it was a joke. He said people aren't getting lynched when they were. Obviously, blacks were getting lynched. In fact, blacks and whites were getting lynched. Any whites who helped the blacks were getting lynched. So he knew he had to do something. And so he comes up with a plan. He says, I'm going to start this great society. And he goes to a black college and he tells them, I am going to take care of all of you. And with that, he starts welfare. And he sends 100,000 social workers into the black community to encourage them to kick the father out of the house so they can get welfare money. And we, Kevin and I and Lonnie have a mutual friend that I talked to, and she said that when she was a teenager, she would hear her mom arguing with the social worker because her dad had lost his job temporarily. And the social worker would basically say, kick that bum out of the house. I can get you twice as much money. And she said that her aunt would get calls from the social worker saying, hey, I'm coming over in an hour. Hide his coat, his keys, and his boots so I can say that there's no man in the house and I can get you more money. And what you see is you see this force, and he targeted the African Americans, right? Because he wanted the South to vote for him. And he said, look, now I'm giving you all this money. Now you can argue, I argued that he was a racist and he knew this is one way to control them. But again, you take it wherever you want to go. But as a result of this, the black community, in fact, if you look at I mean, it's a little known fact that before the 1960s, more blacks would get married than whites. The marriage rate was higher amongst blacks than it was from whites. And yet in the 1965 onwards, we start seeing that drop off where now more and more black babies are born out of wedlock. More and more black women are single mothers, and you see more family head. Why? Because once the man is not needed, he has no purpose in life except for himself. And you go back to the rogue male problem. Well, what happens with the rogue male problem? Well, the rogue male problem, there are always other leaders of the rogue males, and you get roving gangs. And what do we see in the inner city? Roving gangs. And now these are gangs fighting against other gangs. Gangs need a way to make money, so they're stealing, they're hijacking cars, but most of all, they're dealing in drugs. And so now you see this whole scenario develop naturally from let's kick the father out of the house.
Well, the other thing you see about drugs, gangs, especially in law enforcement, is one of the first things you realize is they are a substitution for acceptance and family. Instead of the once nuclear black family, if we're talking about blacks, and it's about race, so that's what leftists and Democrats make it about race, is that they are a substitute, gangs are a substitute for the once nuclear black family.
Well, men want leadership. Men are seeking fathers.
Yes.
The gang leader becomes now their de facto father, becomes their replacement father.
Exactly. Yin, Yang, Mars, Venus, both halves make a whole that is absolutely necessary. One without the other is essentially pointless. Now, you go back and you illustrate in this book also, FDR didn't do anybody any favors. FDR was result, he redlined in terms of housing, and he said essentially to banks, you ought to consider this. The term wasn't redlining at the time, but it was basically saying that what about these neighborhoods where people in areas are considered too risky for an investment predicated upon racial composition? So that started under FDR. Then you go into great detail in this book in terms of history. There's a guy named Jacob Magid, a tailor from New York City, under FDR's draconian National Industrial Recovery Act. At the time, theoretically, the 40 cents, for example, in a tailor was the price that was charged for doing a particular bit of tailoring work. He reduced it to 35 cents. So FDR threw him in jail behind this. It's like, my God. And I'll get to this, but I'm kind of bigfooting myself here in terms of there's a specific time in this book, Neil Mammon, when you bullet point this and this and this and this and this and this, and I immediately said, I see one trend, one obvious link through all of this. It's Democrats, blah, 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 Democrats, blah, 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 Democrats, blah, 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 Democrats, blah, blah, blah. Now, I can page forward to that in the book. And like I say, I'm kind of bigfooting myself, but the theme was Democrats, always has been, and always will be.
Yeah.
A pro-lynching racist. Let me go to some of the other tabs here. The social workers were incentivized to remove fathers from homes. Then they were tasked with encouraging single-parent households to become reliant on government assistance. You know, just when you think government creates the problem and then government attempts to step in to solve the problem that they created. An incredible book. I'm going to see if I can go forward here a little bit.
Let me just jump in here, BZ. There's one thing
Please,
I wanted
sir.
to point out, of the
Please,
many
sir.
things that I want to point out, but I've been taking copious notes here, is that the movie Claudine with Diane Carroll, who I had a big crush on back in the day, I had one view of it in my youth, and those with a darker paint job as well. But come to find out, the backdrop to that movie storyline is the very things that Neil covers in his book, and that you are outlaying of the things that you see in the book and your own personal experience. And me, as someone with a darker paint job who grew up in Southern California, I saw up close personal how the Black community went from being a community of overcomers to a community that lacked fathers. And then subsequently, we had a community that was besieged by gang activity. And this is a community where I grew up, which was in Los Angeles area, in the southwest quadrant of Los Angeles, that had is a solid middle class, upper middle class community of just folks who happen to have the darker paint job. And I remember in my neighborhood, you could count on one hand how many households were single parent, typically female head of household in the entire neighborhood. And I remember the families themselves, and some of the families I was close friends with the sons. And I'm not going to go far down this rabbit hole, but let me just say, as one family was a father and a mother, and there were 3 girls and 2 boys, and the family split, and then the family lost the home, the mother, and they lost the home, went into foreclosure, and that family disappeared. And then some years later, I ran into that family in Los Angeles in a different part of town. Let's just say the place where the rent was dirt cheap for a reason. And that family, and oh, and by the way, that family, the mother was a den mother for the Boy Scouts. And I was a Boy Scout, became a Boy Scout because of moving to the community when my parents moved there in 1966. And I became a Boy Scout from a Cub Scout. And so I see this family years later, and they're not prominent like they were when they lived in our community. Mom was there. The oldest daughter had a child out of wedlock. The younger daughter was pregnant at the time. The oldest boy was drugs and incarcerated, and then the youngest boy was a homosexual, and that's all because, quite frankly, because the father was gone.
Yeah.
And so it was, and then that was duplicated throughout the community. You begin to see that. And then jump this gang that is known today because of gangster rap and everything. And well, I'll say who they are. They call themselves the Crips. there's an interesting history about that name and where they got it. The name Crip, think of cripple and so forth. And that gang rose to prominence because of this, I should call them roving gangs of unsupervised black male youth went throughout the Los Angeles area in that part of town and wreaked havoc on anyone that was not a part of the demographic of the broken families and so forth. So I grew up in a 2-parent household, and so let's just say I had to deal with them in my last 2 years of high school, and my peers as well. So the things that Neil covers so eloquently in this book, and the things you know from practical experience, BC, are things that I lived. I saw it. I didn't know why it happened the way it happened, but I saw the fallout. When the dads were gone, which I used to call the bull elephants, when they were gone, there was trauma in the jungle,
Yeah.
and it took the bull elephants to be reestablished for there be to those communities to come back to what they were, and they haven't bounced back from that. Here we are in 2025.
Neil Mammen, I'd like to ask you a question. I'd like to see if I can solicit your assistance on this, please. Here we have the Mark I Model 1 Lonnie Poindexter. And here we have you, Neil Mammen. And this is me asking you, Neil Mammen. I keep telling Lonnie, you have a number of books to your credit. I keep telling Lonnie, and would you please emphasize to him, sir, he has a book inside him.
More than one, easily.
In terms of being an inspiration, in terms of his family, in terms of his dad, his mom, the conditions under which he lived, the success, all of that stuff. And I keep asking Lonnie, geez, would you please get to it and write a book? And Neil, would you help me out with this, please?
Yeah, I mean, and it's even easier today, Lonnie. You just have to record all your memories onto something, and then you get somebody to put it all together. There are people who do that, and they're not too expensive either, especially if you hire them in the Philippines or something.
Okay.
The other thing I want to talk about that is in this book here is it talks about family on page 62, or excuse me, marriage. The first casualty of this was marriage. Until 1950, as you pointed out, African Americans got married more often than whites. So fatherless skyrockets. The percentage of female-headed households skyrockets. Numerous charts and graphs to indicate precisely this. And the only conclusion I can make out of all of this, Neil Mammen and Lonnie Poindexter, is this was intentional.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
It's the only thing you can reason. I mean, it was intentional on the masterminds. I think the poor social workers and the pawns were just doing what they were told to do. Oh yeah, we should give more money. More money is good. It's it's toxic love, right? It's toxic charity. In fact, there's a book that a missionary wrote called Toxic Charity, and he talks about how charity can be very toxic. It can destroy cultures. And I won't go into that here, but you should definitely look it up. But this is the same thing. It was toxic charity. We went out and we said, here's money, here's money, here's money, and you're destroying it. Well, I'll give you an example of toxic charity in the real world. Tom's, the shoe company, for every shoe you bought, they'd give a free shoe to some child in Africa.
Right.
Well, what did that do? That destroyed the entire shoe industry in Africa. Cobblers went out of business. They bankrupted all these technology, the leather makers, the needle makers, this whole group, this whole market segment got bankrupted. And Tom's is like, but we're doing good. And luckily, Tom's realized that this was the worst thing they could do, is give free shoes out and displace all the natural commerce there. And finally, they realized, okay, well, what we should do instead is we should now try to make up for with it. So now they actually have shoe factories in those areas that they previously destroyed, which is far better because now you're bringing skills, you're bringing commerce, you're building all the industries that need to support those factories. So that's the same thing that they were doing here. They were going out and saying, here's some free money, here's some free money, here's some free money. And they were destroying their local economy, they're looking at their local infrastructure, the local families and everything. And instead, what they should have been doing is saying, look, we are going to help you. And then, of course, they went the other extreme. We're going to help you by hiring you even when you're not capable. Right? And somewhere in the book, I said, look, if a company like Amazon or Google wants to help people, they shouldn't go out and hand people money. They shouldn't donate to BLM. What they should do is, look, Amazon, we've got a bunch of multimillionaires on Amazon who make their money by selling knickknacks and whatever, right? These people understand business. Why don't we say, look, we're going to help these multimillionaires on Amazon. I'm not talking about Bezos. I'm talking about the small business people who made so much money on Amazon, on YouTube, or whatever, and say, we want you to help these inner city kids learn those skills. We don't want to give you a handout. We want you to teach them skills so that they may start their own business. They may start the whole thing. And maybe, in fact, what you should do is teach them the skills so that you might want to hire them to help your business, because that incentive now helps you, helps them, helps everybody else. That's the kind of thing that we should be doing instead of handing out money or giving people promotions that they don't deserve. That's the worst thing you can do.
Yes.
Neil Mammen on page 68 in your book, and I'm going to read the quote because, again, I can't summarize things like that. And that's, when I want to talk about things like this, it's wonderful that I have the professionals to be able to consult that know so many things about this. But in summary, you said, finally, the racists had found out how to keep African Americans down and also put them to use. Blacks had survived slavery intact. They'd survived the attack on them economically. They'd survived Jim Crow. They'd survived lynching, but they were simply not able to survive and extricate themselves from the shackles of free money and free handouts, which resulted in fatherlessness and utterly destroyed their culture and their families. And then you make a link to today, which is so true. And if I'm going to have to pre-ding you, which is this, I can't do it one-handed, which is this. There's a saying on the internet, if the product is free, then you are the product.
Or the product.
Holy moly. That was, I intuited that most everybody did. They understand it, but only when it's made clear to them, as you did with this book, Neil Mammen. I have so many more tabs. Then we go into, you had mentioned the KKK earlier. And then you mentioned Margaret Sanger, and then you mentioned genocide. And I thought, since I'd already read the book, there are people that are saying that these quotes, if I can find them, here we go. I'll put these up because people are saying, oh, no. This is not what Margaret Sanger meant. And I guess that's because you think that because you can't read. But the quotes are, but from my view, I believe there should be no more babies. 1947. The most merciful thing that a large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. 1920, Margaret Sanger. And then, of course, the one that, no, Margaret Sanger never said this. This can't be true. We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. 1939. She accepted, here's a quote, I accepted an invitation to talk to the women's branch of the Ku Klux Klan. I was escorted to the platform, introduced, began to speak. In the end, through simple illustrations, I believe I had accomplished my purpose. A dozen invitations to speak to similar groups were proffered. And yet, Democrats, blacks, whites, leftists, oh, Margaret Sanger was wonderful. Hence, Planned Parenthood. And roughly, as you write in the book, Neil Mammen, I don't know, how many, say, black babies have we lost, for example, to, I don't know, Planned Parenthood?
22 million is the number as of a few years ago. It's obviously increased now, but 22 million, which is actually almost 50% of the African-American population.
Yep.
There are about 44 million African Americans. 22 million have been killed.
Well, as you write in the book, it's black genocide. Because blacks are, oh God, here's the page I was looking for. Oh, wait, this is going to be great. Blacks are what, 13% of the population right now?
About 15%.
13, 15, something like that.
13, yeah.
Yes.
And could be infamous in so much more. And you know, I'll just probably like you. Well, let me just ask you point blank. This wasn't in any of my questions over here. Neil Mammen, how many times have you been called a racist, and by whom?
Well, I have to admit, they've never said it to my face. But they have said it to Kevin. They called him a white supremacist. So
Yeah.
It's been implied that I was a racist. But so here's the thing that I've learned to do, which is hard for white people to do. If the person is white, I look at them in the face and I go, I think that's a racist comment that you just made. And it usually stops it right there. Because the reality is that if you attack them back just as vehemently as they attack you, the problem is most people go, I'm not a racist. That's not the answer. The answer is no, you're the racist. Let me explain why. It's because you want to kill black babies. You want blacks not to have a high literacy rate. You want blacks not to be killed by their own kind. And you go down the list of things. And as soon as you start doing that, you've taken a lot of their fire out, because not only have you called them a racist, but you've also given the reasons, because you don't care about black people.
Let me ask you this then, putting you on the focus, Lonnie Poindexter, how many times have you been called a racist? Or like Larry Elder, the black face of white supremacists. Yeah.
Ooh, geez, how much time do we have? I've been called a white supremacist as well. So it's really funny, because with my last name being Poindexter, there's a natural assumption that I must be white. And then they find out that I have the darker paint job. It's pretty interesting. But I think Neil's on point when you respond back with information that causes them to pause and think. Sometimes you can turn them to something. I catch the most heat from clergy. You know, that's
really.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, I know Neil probably as well, but I definitely get it from black clergy. Yeah, black clergy, and it's which is why there has to be the tools have to be hammered and put together, much like you'd make a sword. You know, like the old days, they hammer on that metal until they turn it into a fine blade, and it would be the information that we provide with the as tools that that Kevin has produced and Neil has produced, and their peers, you know, throughout the folks that have in my view, the proper worldview. Oh yeah, you get called on. Here's the one that I really enjoyed, being in DC and having the radio show for a number of years. Yeah, I used to catch my producer. I used to wear her out, because you know people want to call into the show so they can chew me a new one, and they pretend to be nice folks, and then when they get the mic, you know, they wouldn't let me have it. And but the one I used to get the most often was, Lonnie Poindexter, how much are all them rich Republicans paying you to sell out your own people?
And the answer was not enough.
Yeah, as I crack open another can of top ramen or tuna, you know, tuna in the can, I'm going, not as far as I know. And because just as Neil had stated and you reiterated, the BLM organization, you know, they all bought multi-million-dollar homes, and more than one. And I didn't buy any multi-million-dollar homes.
Sorry.
How much money they paying you for you to sell out your own people, Lonnie Poindexter? I'm like, oh my goodness.
Well, this is the story. This is the part of the book where I said, gee, when I get to it, I'm going to refer to it. Well, here we are. Gee, look, boys and girls, on this book, How to Stop Racism in America, I'm on page 74. And this is basically the crux of the biscuit right here. And then I've got another question for NEIL MAMMEN directly after. And on this, you say the answer to why there is black plight. And then, this is me going, I am an elder, ancient, obese dude, and even I understood and intuited the thread behind this. There are 6 bullet points. And the first one said, and folks, you tell me at home when you see the thread on this place. Number 1, the government did not step in to protect their inalienable rights. That's the answer as to why is there black plight. Number 2, government aid was designed to destroy the family and remove fathers from the home. Number 3, government aid was provided specifically to maintain their dependency for government unions and the left ensure they stay in failing gang-ridden schools, which has brought their proficiency literally rate down to 17%. Number 5, the government created things like the minimum wage to prevent them from being able to grow economically independent. Number 6, the government is effectively paying abortuaries like Planned Parenthood to keep the black population under control. Folks, do you see a link throughout all of this? $700,000 to the first person that says the government. NEIL MAMMEN, can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, well, I mean, you should add one thing. It's not only the government. It's, as you said, it's also a certain party in the government that is responsible for each and every one of these things. But by the way, I didn't mention about the minimum wage. I should add this in. A lot of people don't realize this, but back in the Jim Crow era, the blacks were doing really well and they were getting really, really advanced in their skills because a black person would go to a white racist who owned a contracting company or whatever, a laundry company, and they would say, hey, I'll work for half of what a white person would work for. So green is the best color of all. And so the white racist contractor would say, I'll be happy to make twice as much on my contracts. Sure, you can have the job. And so they were taking that money and they were going home and they were developing those skills also. And that's why you had black lawyers and black banks, and you had black insurance. In fact, the first insurance companies, health insurance companies, were started by black entrepreneurs who said, hey, if you pay us, we'll start this health insurance company and we'll pay for the doctor. All this stuff was done because they were able to bring that money in. Well, the KKK came around and said, we can't let these blacks take all these white jobs. We've got to stop them. So they would go in and they'd threaten the owners, and the owner would say, no, yeah, that's fine, we won't hire them. But then about a few months later, they'd go, hey, the money's too good, we're going to hire them again. And so they had nothing to control them. You can't have a monopoly unless you have the government enforcing it. And so they basically said, the only way we can do this, we have to have a minimum wage. And so the origin of the minimum wage was racism. In fact, it had worked really well in Canada just previously to stop the Chinese from taking white Canadian jobs. And so they brought it here and they said, it worked there, it's got to work here. And so they were able to then install the minimum wage. And the minimum wage today is still what keeps black Americans, because if you have a 17% literacy rate, that means you can't read, you can't write, you can't do the stock, you can probably not add and subtract properly. How are you going to get a job paying 25%? So you're going to get a job paying 0 because you're not going to get a job. If there was no minimum wage, you could go in and the guy would say, look, you're not worth much to me because you can't read or write. But if you start working here at $5 an hour, you can end up learning the skills, and then soon you'll be worth $10, and then you'll be worth $15, and soon you'll be worth $50 because you're running the whole thing. But they will never get that chance. And in the book, I explained that I actually did that. And one of my startup companies, we didn't have an IT guy. We didn't have any money to pay the IT guy. So I went to our youth group, a high school group, and I said, hey guys, some of you guys are techies, you understand it, you can learn. Come on over. I can't pay you a dime, but I'll buy you pizza every night. They were like, I'm there. And I had these for free, working for me for pizza. They would work, they'd come in, we'd have a problem, they'd fix it, they'd put in, they'd wire in all the Ethernet and everything that we needed to. And one day, one of the guys said, can you pay me? I said, yeah, we might be able to pay a little. He says, well, I want this much. I'm like, well, that's a lot. He goes, well, the guy next door, the company next door offered me that much money. I said, oh, we'll pay it. Why? Because he now knew all those skills and could do it. Well, in a few years ago, the conclusion of the story is a few years ago, I was on LinkedIn and I saw that this guy had become the chief information officer of a major Christian university.
Cool.
And I said, congratulations. He said, I want you to remind you that I started this working for you for pizza.
For pizza. Wow.
That is so wonderful. Okay, so chapter 11. I'm in your book, by the way, folks. We're talking to NEIL MAMMEN. This is his book, How to Stop Racism in America, a Real Solution for African American Plight. I got a fairly good dent in my tabs so far. So there's still, we got another half hour to go or so. I also want to remind everybody, if you would please, that we are this.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And the question in this chapter is, why is there bias against blacks? And then you start with that Jesse Jackson quote again. And so why is there bias? One of the things you say is, but blacks can't succeed in America due to the color of their skin, and that's racism. Do you agree or disagree, NEIL MAMMEN?
Well, you have to understand, if Jesse, well, I start with the beginning of the book. I actually start with a story in what I call the Fast Mart. It's a market in East Palo Alto used to be this gang ridden. Now East Palo Alto is taken over by Facebook, so it's one of the richest places in the country. But it used to be the gang center of Silicon Valley, and right across the bridge was Palo Alto, which was one of the richest parts of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Well, so I do the story, and I'm talking about this Quick Mart that's right on the edge of this boundary, and these four boys come in, and the clerk, who is black, doesn't even look at the four boys. They come in, they're young, they're all boisterous, and they buy what they want and they leave. But then a few minutes later, the clerk sees four more boys, and now she calls the guy in the back room, says, watch the cameras, do all this. And she's black. And the difference, I say, is the first four boys were Indians.
Mm-hmm.
The second set of four boys were black. What's the difference? Well, because Indians don't have a history of robbing stores or being in gangs. In fact, they've got a culture that's so strong that they would be the last person to embarrass their parents. I'm not going to embarrass my parents. And I said in the book, the four black boys were also Silicon Valley boys. Their fathers were also engineers, just like the Indians' fathers were engineers. But the girl encounter didn't know that because she wasn't looking at their pedigree. She was just saying they're black. They fit all the crime statistics and everything. And so my point is that, look, if you see black people doing crimes and you see black people in the gangs and you see black people on this, you're going to naturally associate, just like Jesse Jackson did, that there's something wrong with a person just because he's black. Now, if Indians were going around stealing things, it would apply to Indians too. Every time I walk into the store, they'd be looking, oh, he's an Indian, I better watch him, right? But there's no history of Indians doing that. Now, don't get me wrong. There are many Indians who are robbers and thieves in India. Most of them don't make it over here. Now the guys who make it over are the Sikh drivers who shouldn't be driving, don't know how to speak English, and are killing people, right?
Thuggees.
Give it a pardon?
Thuggees.
Thuggees, right? Well, almost, yeah. Those were Hindus, but yeah, close enough. So what'll happen is in a few years, anytime somebody sees a Sikh with a turban driving a car, they're going to go, oh my gosh, I better watch out for this guy.
Right.
The bias gets built by the experience of the people. So is it a bias against blacks? Absolutely. But why is it a bias against blacks? It's because of the literacy rates, because of the gangs, it's because of the violence, it's because of the attacks and all that. And that's what we have to work against. How do you stop that?
I'm going to go ahead to forward to chapter 13. And I was kind of surprised to see this, and yet not when I began to think about it. Chapter 13 says, if not socialism, then what? Okay, we're bringing socialism into the picture. How is that applicable? And you write, we've spent multiple chapters attacking government charity, also known as socialism. In this chapter, we need to address a few key questions that may have arisen in your mind. Number one, why doesn't socialism work? And number two, if the government is not supposed to take care of the poor, Who does or who is? So first, Neil Mammen, why doesn't socialism work?
Well, first of all, people think of socialism as the opposite of fascism. And they go, oh, yeah, well, there's fascists and there's socialists. There's the two right-wingers and left-wingers. But the reality is that there has never been a famous socialist a fascist in history that wasn't socialist. Think about it. Hitler, most famous right-winger. Socialist, Nazi, socialist. They're like, well, but he was a national socialist. Fine, let's look at Mussolini. He was a socialist. Look at Idi Amin. You know, if you guys are old enough, he was in Uganda. He was a dictator. He was a fascist and a socialist. Look at Saddam Hussein. He was a Ba'ath Party socialist. Look at Faiz al-Assad. He was a Ba'ath Party socialist. I mean, you can go down the list. They're all socialists. Even Caesar was a socialist. Why? Because you can't get power without promising the masses bread and circuses. Right? Nobody's going to give you power unless you give them something. So they're going to follow you. You're going to take power. That's how you become a dictator. Now, what is the difference between a fascist and a socialist? Well, fascism is one step before socialism. In fascism, the government tells the private party what to do with their business. In socialism, the government owns the companies. In fascism, private parties own the government. In socialism, governments own the companies. And so this is what most people don't understand. Now, don't get me wrong. Every time I talk to somebody, they'll go, well, you're just capitalist. I'm like, capitalism doesn't go anywhere in socialism. You still need capital. The difference is capitalism now is owned by the government. Now, let me ask you this, and usually I'm talking to a liberal. I go, let me ask you this. Do you want Donald Trump to own all the capital in this country? Well, obviously you don't. Why? So why would you want? Socialism does not mean there's no capitalism. There is still capitalism. It's just the capital is now owned by an elite group of politicians. And if they get too powerful, you'll never be able to vote them out. So that's the first reason why socialism doesn't work. The second reason why it doesn't work is because we have we have what we call the 7 deadly sins, right? The Bible clearly says that we are all greedy, gluttonous, and lazy. And socialism counts on everybody working as hard as they can and only taking what they need. But in reality, nobody works as hard as they can. They do the opposite. They work as little as they can and they take as much as they can, right? And so what happens is you end up with less work, less productivity, less goods, and more consumption. In fact, there's a lot of wasted consumption. And what happens, you know, the great example is, if you've ever seen that meme, in socialist and communist countries, people wait for bread. And they show this long line of people trying to buy bread. In capitalist countries, bread waits for people. And you see the supermarket full of bread waiting to be bought. That's the difference between capitalism and socialism. It doesn't work because of human nature. We briefly touched on human nature. Man is essentially evil. Man's sin nature. Man is depraved. Man was greedy, gluttonous, lazy. 7 deadly sins: envy, pride. Go through it, right? 7 deadly sins. This describes what mankind is, who they are. So none of this works, and it'll only work, and it's very inefficient. The other thing about socialism, why it's inefficient, is that it turns out that if you give the government $1 in taxes to spend on welfare or something, only 15 cents gets to the poor person. But if you give $1 to a charity, a non-government charity that doesn't work with the government, then 85 cents gets to the poor person. So charities, private charities, are 6 times more efficient. And if you don't want, if you see a charity that's not that efficient, you don't need to give it to them. If you decide the government is not that efficient, they will take care of you. They'll put you in a nice padded cell for avoiding taxes, and they will take care of you, right? So you don't have that option. Governments are just 6 times less efficient than private. So socialism doesn't work that way. And finally, the main thing that socialism doesn't work is because it takes away the need for people to strive. I don't know if many people realize this, but the average age of people dying after retirement is 7 years. 7 years. The average time span for people dying after retirement is 7 years. Why? Because they're not stressing about life. They're not striving for something. They're not looking forward to something. So nobody should ever retire. Should always be doing something new, some new passion, doing something great. I mean, so you might retire from one job, but then you need a new job, whatever that is. So in the same way, what socialism does, it allows people to retire. And as somebody commented and reminded me, as Margaret Thatcher says, socialism only works until you run out of other people's money. And there's lots of arguments against socialism, but we'll stop there.
Well, woohoo! I retired in 2016, and I beat the odds of 7 years.
That's because you're doing something.
It's almost 10 years for me. So
you have a passion. You have a reason to get up in the morning.
on that. Anyway, again, I remind everybody, I'm talking to NEIL MAMMEN. He is, let's see, right over there. There's NEIL. There's Lonnie Poindexter right there. There's me with the fat guy. Anyway,
go ahead. Please, sorry.
How to Stop Racism in America. I got the book. You can get the book. I don't get any cut out of this. I'm not doing it for the money. Blah, 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 blah. I only put people on and books that I believe in and people that I believe in. And that's why NEIL MAMMEN is here tonight. Oh, go ahead, sir. You were going to say.
Yeah, so I wanted to answer the second part of that. If the government doesn't take care of people, who should take care of people?
Yes.
So the very concept of people, of who should take care of the people, goes back to the Bible. Jesus didn't say force your neighbor to take care of the poor. He said you take care of the poor. He said give the shirt off your back to the poor, not the shirt off your neighbor's back to the poor. Right? He didn't say because socialism is nothing more than forcing a neighbor to pay for your favorite charity. Well, why is your charity the most important? Why is feeding the poor the most important? Maybe doing something else is more important and more efficient. So the best person, the best group of people to take care of the poor turns out to be the church. Now, when I first said this to people say, well, that's not possible. I said the church, in fact, I had a bunch of people laugh at me when I said, well, the church needs to be the source of charity. And this guy turned to me and says, you're crazy. He says, last year, our budget for welfare was something like $1.2 trillion. Are you telling me that the church can handle it? I said, no. I said, first of all, we don't need to spend $1.2 trillion. We only need to spend about $200 billion because we're 6 times more efficient than the government.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right? And he's laughed. He said, okay, well, $200 billion. How are you going to raise $200 billion? I said, well, I think that's quite easy, actually. He goes, yeah, your church is going to raise $200 billion? I said, yeah, because last year our church, all the churches put together, mainly conservatives, gave almost $470 billion to charity. $470 billion to charity. So if we wanted to add $200 billion more, all we have to do is give 50% more. And I'll tell you how we can give 50% more. The easiest way to give 50% more is that for every dollar you give to a genuine charity that takes care of the poor, you get $2 in tax write-offs. Now, what does that do? The government saves money and loses 30 cents on every dollar at the most, right? Because you've got that, if your tax rate is at 30%, you don't have to pay 30 cents more in taxes. Yet they got an extra dollar, which is $6 worth of benefits. And we would solve this problem overnight. Now, I don't mean overnight like in, but you've got to still unbrainwash the people who are so dependent. And you can talk about the SNAP benefits and EBT and all that that's coming up. But the reality is that we've got to get them out of this. And part of that, by the way, and I just want to throw this in here, is getting people out of public schools. Especially black kids. And that brings you to the CEO Act. But there's another thing that we did. If you want to put this up there, BZ, is if you go to reviveacademies.com, we have started what we call the Uber of school. And this will take participation with churches. It turns out that most churches don't want to start a school because they don't want to mess with OSHA or the government coming in or HR and all that stuff. They don't want to mess with any of that. So what we do is we allow churches to go, if you go to Revive Academies, you can start school in your church as a ministry. So you don't make any money of it, but your classroom, let's say you have 5 classrooms, you go onto the website, you say I have 5 classrooms. And then a tutor, a homeschool mom who's homeschooling her own kids can say, hey, I live near that church. I would like to take one of these classrooms. So, and then parents whose kids are in public schools but can't afford to homeschool because both of them work, they can now pay $25 a day and drop their kids off at that homeschool that was just started with a tutor. And it's only $4,500 a year if they go through if they go 5 days a week. A lot of times moms may have a few days off work, because they can work remotely, in which case they only go 3 days a week, in which case it drops to about $2,400 a year. That's for a full year of tuition, and homeschooling is the premier of education. Homeschool kids are in such a high percentile rate that they are blowing everybody out of the water. So homeschool is the best education you can get. And so we decided that we got to do this for Black kids, white kids, every kid. Any church that has free space, they can do this. And the parents pay the teachers directly, just like an Uber. You just pay them directly. And so the teachers are not hired by the church. The teachers are contractors, and they are 1099 contractors, which also means that the teacher can write off all their car, their computers, their apartment, their office in their home, their electricity, their water, all that stuff they can write off if they do it correctly. And here's the great thing: if they teach 25 kids, they don't have to, but if you teach 25 kids, a homeschool mom can make $90,000 a year.
Holy moly! Wasn't aware of that. Let me tell everybody this though. Also, the things that you see here tonight, for example, like this and the other locations that I put up in terms of websites, will all be available to be seen if you go to my Rumble channel. I put up in my, give me a couple of hours to assemble everything here. But if you missed any of the videos or the websites or anything like that, go to the SHR group Rumble channel on Rumble. Go to Rumble, type in SHR Media in there. You'll see BZ's Saloon. You'll see this show. Click on that. All the show links will be in there, including all the websites that Neil spoke of, Lonnie spoke of. It's not like they've disappeared and you can never find them again. I intentionally do that so that you can, in fact, find them again. And that brings me to chapter 14. And you delineate, Neil Mammen, what won't work to fix Black plight. There's a list of things. And then maybe you can address some of these, Neil Mammen. Number one is imagining that slavery causes genetic retardation. 2, critical race theory. 3, accusatory and divisive DEI training. 4, reparations. 5, calling things like punctuality, mathematics, diligence, good grammar, all white supremacy, and encouraging Black kids to reject those things. 6, blaming racism or white supremacy for everything. 7, calling everything racism. 8, wokeism. 9, subsidizing and promoting abortion. 10, rewriting history, e.g. the 1619 Project. 11, blaming whites or asking them to apologize. 12, promoting victimhood. 13, calling everything a microaggression. As I've termed it for years, it's the hierarchy of victimhood. So, Neil Mammen, if you could address some of those particular issues.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that there's some, as I said, and I've seen this so many times, there's some crazy idea that slavery causes genetic retardation. I mean, what? And this is a racist attitude. Oh, you're Black and you're a son of a slave, so something's wrong with you. I mean, can you think of the height of racism? I can't. I mean, it's just horrible. Critical race theory, obviously, critical race theory is basically right out of liberation theology, right out of Marxism. And it's the whole idea of separating people into oppressors and oppressees. It's a victimhood mentality, right? It's just codifying the victimhood mentality. Oh, I'm an oppressee, so therefore I'm morally correct. So basically, critical race theory says if you're oppressed, then you are morally correct. If you're an oppressor, it doesn't matter what you say, you're wrong. And this, I always use this to my benefit, being brown-skinned in a white society. I was once on a flight, and this lady, and I was teaching about critical race theory, and she said, I don't agree with that. I said, well, I'm brown, so I'm automatically right. She goes, oh, I said, I think problem with the situation, don't you? She didn't want to talk anymore.
Imagine that.
Right. So there's a bunch of the, and then again, reparations. Reparations are not going to work. And as Kevin said, Neil, if they have reparations, will you apply? I'm African American, so I get it. No, it's only for children of slaves. But somewhere in my history, there was slavery. Almost every culture had slavery, right? So somewhere in my history, it's like, how does this work, right? So, and then the whole thing about blaming white racism or white supremacy for everything. This is not, I mean, again, this is, all you're doing is you're going back to your victimhood. So it goes through that, and then the calling everything a microaggression, you know, gosh, people are not going to want to hang around you.
Yeah, lighten up. Good God. And the other three things that, unfortunately, I didn't see until I turned the page. 14. These are important. 14. Rioting and burning down buildings, especially in black areas of town. What? I never understood that. 15. Lowering standards for schools, colleges, or anything for that matter. 16. Giving special preferences to blacks.
Yeah, and those are self-evident. Obviously, when Antifa went in, you notice they didn't go into the high-end white areas of the liberals. They went into the black areas. Why? Because they knew that the police would leave them alone. And then, of course, lowering standards for schools and colleges. You want kids to be less employed, less able to fend for themselves, and giving special preferences to blacks. The problem is exactly that. When you start giving, it's more of the DEI thing, where you start giving people privileges that they're not capable of handling, right? And all they do is a great example. I don't really talk about it in the book. A great example is that when they first started doing DEI type policies, or even certain policies in the past, where a kid who was maybe a 3.0 would be admitted to Harvard or Yale or something. And this is before when Harvard and Yale really were Harvard and Yale. Now you don't learn anything there. He would go to a tough college like that, and it would be so tough that he would drop out. And here's a kid who could have gone to a regular college and could have gotten a good job, could have done well, but instead he's a loser because he was pushed into an area that he was not capable of handling. You know, and there are reasons why those colleges were at high academic standards, because they were really rigorous. Now, of course, that's all gone, and you could go to Harvard just and do nothing. You can get underwater basket weaving in Harvard probably. Of course, I don't know what you do with that degree when you graduated, except complain.
Well, yeah, or go to Starbucks and pull the handle that sounds like a honey badger vomiting. Here's a circular firing squad problem that you mentioned earlier, and it's page 151. You write, but today the problem isn't really these old intentional types of racism. Today, the new and perhaps unintentional racist actions are the government and legal actions that keep blacks dependent. And then you also mention, but calling folks who haven't a racist bone in their body a racist is only going to create rifts and tensions and make things work. And people say, leftists, Democrats, they say, oh, we cannot forgive. You can never forget racism. And then, according to what you say, NEIL MAMMEN, this is the circular argument that solves nothing.
The reality is America is the least racist country I've ever lived in. And you've seen the number of countries I've lived in, right? Jamaica, Ghana, Ethiopia, Yemen, Sudan, right? It's the least racist country. In fact, India is more racist than America. Funny, you know, there's a funny story about Indians. You know, when what's his name? Prince Harry had a son with gosh, what's her name?
Oh, Princess Di.
No. She's half black. Meghan Markle.
Oh, right, right. She was on Suits.
There was some comment made about the British were wondering how dark the child were, right? And the Indians on Facebook were like, the question, how fair is the child? The question that every grandmother asks, because even Indians have this whiter is better kind of attitude, right? Because they think that if you're lighter, then it's better, it's more beautiful. And that came from the Aryans, because India used to be predominantly Dravidians, darker race. The Aryans came in from the Germanic tribes, came in and took over India. And so they brought their elitism in them. So you can see that. But India is a very racist country. I mean, talk about a country where the caste system exists. You want to talk about racism? That's India. Go to the the Middle Eastern countries. It's sexist.
Yep.
It's racist. It's religiousist, whatever you want to call it, right? If you're not a Muslim, you're nothing, right? So when I came to America, I can truly say when I came to America, there wasn't a single American family that I found to be racist that I interacted with. Now there were the jerks on the street, that were jerks, but they were just jerks. They weren't racist. They were just jerks, right? So yeah, are there racists in America? Absolutely. But are they every day, everywhere? Absolutely not.
There's one more thing that I want to get to, and that I've seen or heard. You're the only individual that has put this in a book that I've read. And as far as I know, none of the American media maggots will even remotely address this. It's got to be what is in my consideration. And Lonnie, I'd like you to weigh in on this when I mention it. This would piss me and torque me off to no end. And you mention it in your book. And it's on page 158. And let me see if I can put that up there. It's called infantilization. If that isn't some of the most demeaning, insulting things that you can think of, is how American blacks are treated as though they are infants and don't have a brain in their head. And you write in terms of this: beware the disguise of benevolence, lowering standards, in essence, infantilizes black individuals. So few people talk about this. NEIL MAMMEN, please hit on that if you would.
Well, first of all, I want to credit my co-founder, Kevin McGarry. He's the one who came up with that word. And we've talked about it. Lonnie has heard, we've talked about this a lot. So basically, if you say the blacks can't get a driver's license to vote, are you saying they're incapable of getting a driver's license? I mean, they've never rented a car, or they're all driving illegally. They've never gone into a hotel room, checked in a hotel room. They've never flown on a plane. This is infantilizing them. And the very statement should make you realize that the person who is saying that is a racist. And it goes through this whole thing. We're in fact, they're not capable of learning mathematics. They're not capable of learning physics. So therefore, we shouldn't require this level of mathematics. They're not capable of reading English properly. So we should let them graduate without being able to. It's all infantilization, and it's pure racism. It's what it is. In fact, that's what when if somebody accuses you of being a racist, you could say, what, you don't think blacks can get a driver's license? You don't think blacks are capable of learning English? You don't think blacks are capable of learning mathematics or even learning good manners? You want to let them bypass the entire system. You're the racist because you think that they're incapable of doing this.
Lonnie, does that not piss you off to no end?
Yeah, I had to jot down some notes as he was saying that. Oh my God. Reminds me of you shall remember this. Oakland, California, back in the day when it was determined that because blacks couldn't speak, and I use the term King James English, the term Ebonics was developed. You guys remember that?
I remember.
Yeah, the E word.
Oh my goodness. And I grew up, what's his name? I should think of the name of the actor. He's the black actor that played the love interest to one of the Cosby girls' daughters in the Cosby TV show. And I forget his name. I can picture his face. And he wrote a book years ago. He's a conservative. He got beat up a lot, so he's kind of shied away from all that. He's a business person now, but he wrote a book, and the title of the book, it says he talked like a white boy. So, because he was constantly accused of speaking like a white person, as if there's some kind of difference between black and white. And when I grew up in Southern California, in the community I grew up in, I remember the terms I used to use. My mother, if there was certain way we spoke different words and certain words we'd use, if my mom was within an arm shot of us, we'd catch a backhand. You know, it was, so I'm going to say it, where's mom, before I say what I'm going to say. And because we were taught to speak a certain way, and that's what I learned early on, your ability to articulate your thoughts in a compelling way is, I think, the primary determiner on whether you can be gainfully employed in the business community. And so I learned early on, because I was accused often of talking like a white boy. And so this goes along with that same mindset, and he's to incense me. I was with a childhood friend. Okay, I'm going down a rabbit hole. I'll make it short.
Sure.
A childhood friend I grew up known him almost my entire life. Started a computer company in Irvine, California, and the computer company was in a community that I don't know if we measured 1% of the population as being Black. This is in Orange County in Southern California. And we were told that we would never be successful with all the white people down there. And well, we went on to be successful, and we grew that business from a garage business into a corporate entity. And we had about 19, 20 employees. And our 99.9% of our client base were white folk. And so how did we become successful in that? Well, he could compel his thoughts in a compelling way. He spoke like I did. Well, he was raised like that. And we came from a community where we all spoke that way, because that's the way that our parents taught us. If you wanted to be successful, you know, you can't speak like Snoop Dogg and all, well, I put it out there, and the rest that are there. Now he's getting paid millions of dollars today, but there was okay, I'm going down the rabbit hole. Let me stop. But yeah, this thing is it it can get me going, and I can go on for a while and talking about this thing. Yeah. And where does this come from? So you have oh boy, what's the politician, Neil, that and she's running for office, and she was stating that Blacks were like somebody that you know, when you, okay, if you have a disability or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Gosh.
Oh,
Yeah,
she compared it to the ADA.
yes, this just
Did she
happens.
not?
Oh, and it's no different than the Ebonics thing that happened in Oakland, California. And you know, Ebonics is now a term that's used. It's in books and textbooks and everything else now.
See, that came from SCOTUS. If you remember, that's Ketanji Brown Jackson, who made mention
Yes,
of that,
yes,
sitting on SCOTUS. She's a
yes,
jurist
yes.
and says that essentially there, you know, what other interpretation is there to be removed, to be culled from that, other than, I'm sorry, Blacks are disabled and they need all the help, because the disabling obviously means mentally. So how do you possibly come to that conclusion?
Mentally
And you're
deficient.
sitting on the highest court in the land.
She's
Yes.
the racist.
Yes, the racist. You know
Okay,
what
stop.
the woman was. Oh boy.
Oh my God. Talk about daft. The adjectives, they're up in the air, floating around me, and most of them I can't repeat here. I could grab one or two, but I think I've summed it up. That's just stupid.
Yeah.
Heavy sigh. Well, you know what? It's past the magic witching hour.
Oh, okay.
So that's it for tonight, kids. I want to thank my great guest tonight, NEIL MAMMEN. And I want to thank my other great guest tonight, Lonnie Poindexter. And just as I suspected, I didn't get to a fraction of the stuff that's in here. But I'm going to get your other book. I have already ordered it, and when it comes in, I'd like to have you back on. That roundtable discussion thing that we spoke about earlier with regard to religion. And see, that's the other thing. NEIL MAMMEN. We didn't even really get to religion
No, we didn't. We didn't.
tonight at all. And
My favorite topic too.
yeah, and I can't make these 4-hour shows, although I did make the other one with religion a 3-hour show. But I got to have you back for that. I have to have you back in order to speak to religion in general, and then also with regard to religion in America, and also the influence of Islam that we're discovering. It's been here for so long with regard to the UK, which is going away, and the assault by Islam, as far as I'm concerned, in the United States of America. Dearborn is gone. Hamtramck is gone.
Yep.
The assault on Texas is ongoing. There's so many things and so many areas to cover. And then, of course, if I can put this up, I also want to have you back to discuss your book, This Jesus is Involved in Politics. And quite frankly, my great disappointment in organized religions and my great disappointment in pastors, including some that I've met in Idaho who just don't seem to get the concept. They don't grok the concept that, you may not be interested in politics, but politics is always interested in you, no matter who you are, no matter if you're affiliated or running religious operations. You think you can stand back and hold it at arm's length, and that cannot be done.
So let me give you one more resource.
Yes, sir.
Go to mychurchfinder.org, not .com, .org.
Yes.
You can. It's a website I created with a gentleman named Roger Ellswick, who's funding it, that basically allows you to find the churches that are politically active, culturally aware, and biblically sound. Now, we don't have enough there, so there's a invite your pastor option that invites your pastor to fill out our survey, because every church fills out their own survey, and then we list them. So we don't have too many. We've got a bunch in Boise, but I don't think we have any over by your neck of the woods, BZ. We do have a bunch in Southern California. So, but go in there, invite your pastor to fill out the form, and within a month, we will actually be going automatically to websites that you recommend, and we will review the last 52 sermons of the whole year's worth of sermons by AI and determine whether you are politically active, culturally aware, talk about abortion, talk about homosexuality, and if you're biblically sound.
Oh, NEIL MAMMEN, that appears to be so incredibly delicious. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the pastoral butts that will be lit aflame when it's discovered that, we're on that list?
That's our hope.
Maybe we'd better get our own very personal butts in line with teachings and with, as I said before we got onto the show, I said, why and how is it that so many people, pastors, churches cannot understand the linkage between, say, Islam and freedom and politics and your very personal, intimate ability to conduct your religion in your church in freedom in the United States of America? How do you not make that linkage? How do you not get that concept?
That's
here we go. It's the shrug of the shoulders. Like, I don't know. How is that possible?
And I don't think we covered this, or maybe we did, because I had to jump off a little bit. But I want to also mention that every Black Lives Matters or every BLM.com is a 501c3 nonprofit. So if you happen to visit the site, you can donate there as well if you value the work that of the organization and the brilliant work that Neil and Kevin, based on the vision that they put together at the suggestion of Neil's lovely bride. It's valuable work. I've traveled to them across the country for many speaking engagements that they've done, and it's pretty powerful. And when they do get a church that'll give them the pulpit, so to speak, and to illustrate a lot of what we're talking about today, or at least some of it, it has changed some hearts and minds in terms of folks understanding that yes, Jesus was very much involved with politics. It cost him his life, and
Yep.
his first cousin John. A lot of folks don't make that connection. I said, it was politics is why he was killed, and they're, oh, what do you mean? No, it was, yeah. Anyway, you guys know me. I'll go down that rabbit hole, but it's important. So just keep that in mind. You go to everyblm.com and you can learn about the other projects that we're involved with, and they've always look. Let me tell you something, BZ. Sitting in on the conference calls with them, I'm always, oh, here comes something else that we're going to be doing, because they get the vision for something that they see that's important. And so they've launched several platforms, some of which was covered today. There's more that was not covered. For just want to keep in mind for your viewership that they can learn more. Just go to everyblm.com, go to Neil's platforms as well for the work that he's doing. Oh, let me mention this. And Neil, I don't know if you covered this because I had to jump off a couple of times. If you want to see what Jesus would do and is doing, because we know that we are, okay, I won't start preaching here. Neil was involved with a church in Northern California that pushed back on COVID. And so that you can do that and succeed, they try to shut the church down.
Guaranteed.
And Neil, because Neil's not gonna brag about himself, but he was intricately involved with this taking place, and I was like, whoa. And government backed off. So the big ugly gorilla that government can be in intimidating you, they had to back off, and because the church stood up. Neil, you want to mention the name of the
Yeah.
organization?
So we were actually going to a different church, and they all shut down for COVID. And my friend Mike McClure at San Jose, Calvary Chapel, San Jose, my wife said, we got to go to a real church. We're not going to this wimpy Zoom church. So I said, well, I bet Calvary Chapel, San Jose, Mike McClure, he's a fighter. He'll stay open. So sure enough, that day he announced we were going to back in. We called it the finest church in the world because we had $4 million in fines.
Yep.
It's the finest church. But the church, when we joined the church, there were about 220 people. By 8 months later, there were almost 2,500 people.
Yeah.
Because everybody who needed a church, and the non-Christians, there was a lot of suicides amongst non-Christians. So this was a church where people would have family and have support. A lot of people said that we had one person say she was on their way to commit suicide, and she saw that the people were in the parking lot on a Sunday. So she walked in and gave her life to Christ. So you can see that it had a powerful impact. And the church fought to, the last thing that, it's a battle that goes back and forth. But the last thing the county was like, look, we'll forgive you all these things if you just say that, you were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the lawyer said, no, I don't think we're going to do that. In fact, I want you to remember that you said you were going to try and disbar me. You were going to try and put the pastor in jail. No, this is going all the way to the Supreme Court, and you will pay us.
Is this it?
Yeah.
Okay, then there you go, folks. You're in San Jose. You might want to go take a peek at them and go partake. And again, folks, I want to remind everybody that all the events, all the websites, that one and some of the others prior mentioned by Lonnie and also by NEIL MAMMEN are going to be in the rumble.com version under show links for this particular show. So if you think, oh, I missed them. No, you didn't miss them. Give me a couple hours to put that stuff in there and you'll be able to find all of those links. So having said that, as I customarily ask any guest who knocks home runs out of the ballpark here, one, NEIL MAMMEN, would you come back? And then number two, if you would please mention any any websites, social media, or other things or points to which you'd like to draw people's attention?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I would love to come back. I'd be honored. This is a blast.
I had a great time. Frankly, I got to tell you, I had a great time.
Usually I only get 20 minutes. So this is a privilege and an honor.
No, it's mine.
Yeah, so my Substack that you have, mammen.substack.com, No Blind Faith. You can see most of my books there. Or if you just go to Amazon and just say, look up Mammen, I have I can't ever remember. I think I have 9 books or something like that there. But, and most of them, we've got apologetics for kids. We've got a bunch of different things there. So yeah, absolutely. Please. If you want to look me on Facebook, it's Jesus Politics Neil. And but do mention that you saw me on this show, because I get a lot of people that are weird. So I'm kind of picky.
So folks, thank you for being here. Neil, thank you for being here so late, because it is, let's see, it's 11:15 where you are. I know I'm a late night show. I'm not everyone's habit. In Central, it's 12:15. It's 1:15 if you're an insane person on the far right coast, because you'd have to be insane. Weird thing is, I get most of my people and most of my viewers and most of my guests from the far right coast. I can't figure that out. But in any event, also, Lonnie Poindexter, if there are any websites or any social venues or other things that you'd like to draw people's attention to.
Just mainly what Neil mentioned, and then you can find out information about me at everyblm.com. Also, the relaunch of the Content of Character Series.com website, and we're diligently working on that. And so you can go there to get news and information about different things that we're doing, because what we saw in the last election is that, this thing that we've been trying to accomplish with educating the Black community, this last election, something took place, and you've got folks who happen to have the darker paint job have recognized that, I call it the great bamboozlement, and that they see now, and they're going to be looking for places they can go to get news and information about what's really going on. And so we'll be recommending them to platforms like yours, BZ, also obviously every BLM.com and the other platforms that are associated with that brand, and also Neil's various brands as well. And so we're in the good fight of faith, and we're going to continue to do that. And on the relaunch of my radio and platform with an add to it that it's going to be a podcast as well. So
really
stay tuned for that. See, you're getting on my case about the book.
Yeah,
I have been trying to get busy with doing something as I feel much better and relative to my health on this journey that I'm on. And it'll be a year since the surgery on December 4th. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wait a minute now. Representing who I am. Who am I? Where am I? Lonnie, are you coming back? Will you be coming back to SHR? Because the invitation, sir, is out there. Well, you disappeared. I don't know why. But anyway, the open invitation is there to you, Lonnie. Anyway, so we can say goodbye to Lonnie, and then to Neil. Sir, wait a minute, I got to be pointing the right way. This screws me up every time. Thank you, sir, ever so kindly for being here tonight. I had a great time, and I hope you did.
Well, I was going to say, I have my daughter and fiance are up in Moscow, so we will be driving up that way. I think you're on the way, right, from Boise?
I am north of Moscow.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How far north?
I'm north of Coeur d'Alene. If
so
you were to go,
okay. Yeah.
If you were to go up 95, I'm past 90 east-west. I'm about 90 miles from Canada, eh?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, because I was going to say we could swing by and have coffee.
Okay, well, if you ever do, you got my number. ring me up. I would love to have some coffee, tea,
Thank you.
or beverages
Beer
of
or
that
something,
nature
something
with you.
stronger.
So, Neil Mammen, sir, I had a great time. Thank you tonight for being here. Folks, I hope you had a great time. I know I did. You know, when you speak to people, you have folks, and I told Neil this. Don't tell him that I talked to him about this, because there are easy interviews and there are difficult interviews, and there are interviews and personnel that you have to drag everything out. And you just no, you know what? With Neil, you just drop some bullet points and let him go. And the dude is highly knowledgeable, highly educated, highly skilled, knows what he's talking about. Your Mark 1, Model 1 SME, subject matter expert. And I am so incredibly blessed by having him here tonight. We're going to have him back. And as a matter of fact, I hope all of you had a great time here tonight. And thanks for being here. And then, of course, what? And so what I'm saying is that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for being here in BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct tonight on the SHR Media Network. Thanks to Neil Mammen. Thanks to Lonnie Poindexter. I didn't get to a fraction of the stuff that I wanted to get to. And of course, as you already well know, promotional consideration is by the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, also by the Shure and Electro Voice microphone company Arrakis Boards, who make my mixer, and also by Pratt & Whitney Engines, producing thrust you can trust. Tiaras tonight. Thanks, Thomas. Tiaras are by My Little Pony. Thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team, with whom I shall be consorting in less than, I don't know, about 10 minutes or so. I had the window over there open all night. It's nice and cool in the studio. You are cool for being here. Neil Mammen is cool. Lonnie Poindexter is cool. You guys have a great weekend, a fabulous weekend. I have an idea. Let's do this again next Tuesday night. Same bat time, same bat channel. Everybody, God bless. Take care. Be safe.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Dad. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Jim Bob.
Good night, and good luck.